two candidates in this runoff election, Barry Loudermilk and former Congressman Bob Barr. Let's start off by finding a little bit about each. Gentlemen, welcome. It's good to see you again, sir. Good to see you. How are you? We'll begin with each of you has 1 minute to introduce yourselves. Mr. Barr, we'll begin with you, sir.
Thank you, Pete. It is a tremendous honor to be here today. As much of an honor it was back in 1994 when I stood before similar crowds and asked for the votes of the people of then the 7th District to serve as their and your congressman from the 7th District of Georgia in the House of Representatives. I stand here today and ask for your votes so that on the morning of July 23rd of this year, you will wake up and read in the paper that you will have representing you in the Congress of the United States and the House of Representatives in January of 2015, somebody who knows what they're doing, who not only will vote the right way, who not only knows what to say, but who knows how to move our conservative agenda forward once again. I ask for your votes to be able to do that because I alone have the track record, the capability, and the experience to do that. Thank you all.
Mr. Loudermilk.
Well, thank you, Pete. Thank you all for being here today. I'm Barry Loudermilk, and as I look across the crowd, I think I know most everyone in here, but there's some that I may not know. So as my consultants say, I always introduce myself. So I'm a husband of 31 years to my best friend and beautiful wife, Desiree. I'm a husband or a father of 3 grown children and a brand new grandfather of only 7 weeks of my little granddaughter, Emma. I worked as a construction laborer in Alaska, as a carpenter in Texas. I served proudly in the United States Air Force where I worked intelligence, and I also worked as a mid-level manager for a defense contractor. I've also, for the past 20 years, been operating my own business. So who am I? Well, I'm pretty much you. I'm a citizen. I work, I live, I worship among the people that are here. And I think that's what our founding fathers had envisioned, citizen legislators who represent the values of the people. I'm also greatly concerned about our nation. So why am I running for Congress? Because our children and grandchildren deserve better than the America we're passing on to them. God bless you. StandWithBarry.com. Thank
you, gentlemen. I'm going to ask you a few questions now, and then you'll have a chance to ask questions of each other. You've seen the time cues. We've done this before. If you have any questions, please just let me know. The Marietta Daily Journal describes you both as capable legislators and dependable conservatives. The paper has endorsed Mr. Barr in this election in part because it says he is from Cobb County, while Mr. Loudermilk lives in Bartow County. Please tell us why that does or does not matter in this election. And we'll start with Mr. Loudermilk.
Well, it's interesting. The old days of territorialism were really run by Democrats of who could bring back the most pork to the district. Well, those days are gone. There's not pork to bring back. I believe let's stop the government from taking the pig instead of just bringing a few slices of bacon home and thinking that we're okay with it. But it also goes a little bit further than that. I mean, it's consistency. That you consistently stand by the values, you consistently stand by what you believe. When I came back from serving in the Air Force and working abroad, I moved into this district and I've consistently lived here. Mr. Barr, however, in 2002, instead of staying in the congressional seat he already had, moved to Cherokee County, where he challenged a sitting Republican who had more seniority than he did, and lost that. And subsequently, shortly thereafter, Naval Air Station Atlanta was closed. And so I think a lot of it is consistently standing for the things that you believe in.
Thank you very much, sir. Mr. Barr.
Not quite sure what any of that has to do with the actual answer to the question. The question, I think, was because Bob Barr is from Cobb County and will maintain the interests of Cobb County front and foremost as the county in which he lives when he serves in the Congress of the United States, why is that important? Well, the importance of that lies not just in that last sentence in the Marietta Daily Journal endorsement. It lies more importantly in what came before, talking about issues that are extremely important, not just to Cobb County, not just to the 11th District, not just to the state of Georgia, but to this entire country. And that is Dobbins Air Reserve Base and Lockheed Martin. Marietta Journal recognizes apparently what my opponent does not, but yet what I think everybody here recognizes, and that is we need somebody in the Congress of the United States next January and for at least the next 2 years after that, that knows how, because he has been there and done it in the past, knows how to protect those jobs, knows how to protect those interests, and will work because of his proven record having done so in the past. That is the answer to the question, Barry.
Gentlemen, I'm going to call an audible. If we find that Dobbins is on a BRAC list, I will ask you specifically and you only, what will you do to prevent that from actually taking place?
Well, there's nothing that any one single person can do. When you're dealing in Congress, it's about relationships. It's about working with others. And it's more than just Congress. It's the governor that is involved. It's our local chambers of commerce. And these are the things that you have to have good, solid working relationships and dedication to a cause and consistently stand for those things. As an Air Force veteran, I understand the importance of air superiority. It was drilled into us. We're the front line of defense.
All right, I'm going to have to stop you. It's 15 seconds.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Sorry.
Okay.
I beg your pardon. You both have expressed a need for immigration reform. If it were within your power, what one step would you take today toward immigration reform, and what would your long-range plan look like? Mr. Barr.
Actually, it's an interesting question because in terms of dealing with a lot of the immigration problems that we have, what is necessary to do in the short term is absolutely essential in the long term. On the one hand, we have to do something that Congress has not done and the government has not done since the late 1980s, and that is to modernize and bring up to date to meet the needs of the workforce of the 21st century our legal immigration procedures and regulations. And this has nothing to do with increasing the number of immigrants. It has to do with taking the number of immigrants in this country and who are allowed to come in and fitting them into the workforce. We need to modernize our work permitting and visa system. Secondly, in the short term, what we need to do is we need to stop the problem that this administration has created, the surge of minors coming across our border. We have to demand that Mexico do something about it. Mexico is the problem. The United States of America is not the problem. And we need to stop sending these immigrants, including gang members, here to Georgia and into other states and communities. We need to send them back to where they came from, and that is Mexico, and demand that Mexico do something about it.
Mr. Loudermilk.
Well, the most immediate thing is the obvious thing. It's common sense. If you have a hole in the boat, you plug the hole. We got a wide open border. I've been to the border. In 2006, as a member of the Georgia State House, we were looking at some pretty significant immigration bills here in Georgia, and I didn't want to just blindly vote on anything, so at my own expense went down to the border, and I stayed on the border for a week to view what was going on, and I realized right then we did not have the will to secure the border. We have to secure the border first. The second thing that we have to do is we have to reform our legal immigration system. When it takes 15 years and up to $15,000 in attorney fees for somebody to legally migrate to this country, that's a problem. And third, we have to have a work visa program because we have had and we will always have migrant workers in this country. But it needs to be one that is temporary, it is trackable, we know where they are, and when it's time for them to go home, they're sent back home.
Thank you, gentlemen. Please hold your applause. I can get more questions in if you give me that time. With the Affordable Care Act now a reality, in what ways would you tweak or change it to make it easier to understand and execute? And how might it be made less of a burden on the American business owner? Mr. Loudermilk.
That's a question that has been asked over and over again, and it's a very important question. What we would like to do, and I know that Bob and I have both discussed this, we would both like to repeal the entire bill. The problem is, as long as this president is in the White House, it's not going to happen. Even if the Republicans take the Senate, we won't have the votes to overturn a presidential veto. So we have to start strategically looking at what are those most egregious aspects and start peeling back on those. One of the things that you ask about businesses, the biggest problem, I met with some orthopedic surgeons just yesterday, and they're telling me, tell us what the rules are. The problem with Obamacare is it's given the administration the ability to create the rules, and they don't even know what the rules are, and the rules are ever changing. It's a moving target. Congress needs to pull back on that and establish what are the rules, what are the criteria. That's the first thing, so businesses will at least know how to plan while we start removing the individual mandate, removing the business mandate, and restoring the freedom back to the people.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Barr.
Of course, the best thing to do with Obamacare, all 2,402 pages of the monstrosity, is to paraphrase Steve Forbes when he talked about the Internal Revenue Code, and that is to stab it, shoot it, strangle it, dismember it, burn it, and scatter its ashes to the four corners of the world. Of course, we don't have the votes yet to do that, but there are some very specific things that we can do in the Congress. It takes leadership, and it takes holding this administration's feet to the appropriations fire to a much greater degree than we've done presently. Yet it's the kind of thing we did to Bill Clinton, and we forced him to the negotiating table. You use the power of the appropriations, and what you do is you stop the regulations through the power of appropriations, through legislative limitation riders, which forces the administration either to accept those or to come to the negotiating table. And that's the way you stop the illegal executive orders that this administration is using with Obamacare and other pieces of laws of this land.
Thank you. Gentlemen, we now come to the portion of this interaction where you can ask each other questions. You'll have 30 seconds to pose your question. You'll have 1 minute to answer the question. And the person who poses this question will have 15 seconds to rebut. We begin now with Mr. Barr.
Thank you. Barry, you've talked a lot in this race, and we've all talked a lot about accountability and transparency and abuse of monies by the government. Yet in your case, serious questions have been raised about a $10,000 Georgia taxpayer-funded video that you now claim ownership of and claim to be copyrighted and used. You also participated in a secret $80,000 sealed judgment against an employee of yours when you served in the state Senate. And other matters that have raised very serious questions in the voters' minds. Are you willing now to come forward tonight and with the degree of transparency that you seem to hold very high when you talk about these issues and tell the voters what you're hiding with regard to your lack of transparency on these and other issues involving abuse of taxpayer money?
Well, Bob, you even surprised me at those accusations because there's absolutely no truth to any of those, and I think you know the truth regarding those. The video was asked by, I was asked by the Department of Education through our nonprofit to create a video to teach the Constitution to children in our public schools, which we did. We wrote, we produced at our own expense the script. My children performed in it, did a phenomenal job. It's now part of the social studies curriculum in the state of Georgia. We received absolutely no money for it. The state paid GPB to film it, and GPB followed federal law because we were not compensated for it. The content of that video was copyrighted into the nonprofit. But the state owns the video. It's free for everyone. You can go to YouTube and see it. So all it does is protect the content. As far as the other, I don't have a clue what you're talking about. The Senate the Senate Human Resources Department let go an employee that happened to be assigned in my office. I had nothing to do with the lawsuit. I don't know any of the details. That was between the state and the Human Resources Department of the Senate.
All right, thank you, Mr. Loudermilk.
They work for the Senate.
Thank you, sir. Would you care to please pose a question to Mr. Barr?
Well, it's just very interesting that one can claim complete ignorance and say, I know nothing, I know nothing.
I'm sorry. I'm being waved off. Once again, I've screwed up. It's my bad. You had a moment to rebut, and I'm terribly sorry. You had a moment to rebut Mr. Loudermilk's last answer.
That's what I'm doing.
Then what are you guys waving at me for? You know, it's my bad. I am so sorry, sir, and I hope you'll forgive me.
Anyway, similar to, I think it was Sergeant Klink, I know nothing. The lady was employed in his office in the Senate, and yet he claims that he knows nothing about an $80,000 judgment that was sealed and which he refuses to release that talks about the harassment by somebody in that office.
Okay, 15 seconds. And including my 15 seconds for screwing up. That was your 15-second rebuttal.
Right.
All right. So, yep, that's it. Mr. Loudermilk, you can pose your question.
Okay,
yeah.
Here's my question. Bob, can you explain why you penned a very glowing letter of endorsement that helped Eric Holder become the Attorney General of the United States?
Well, I don't know whether it helped him or not. It probably didn't. It probably hurt him. But like an awful lot of other key Republicans, both here in Georgia, our senators and others, I was more than happy, based on a personal relationship with the man over many years, despite very serious policy differences, something, of course, that you overlooked, and I guess you know nothing about the fact that that was left out of the flyer that you put out on this. But unlike you, I have called repeatedly for his resignation because of my extreme disappointment in the way he has comported himself in the office, Barry, which I think is much more important than a letter that might have been written pro forma some 5 to 6 years before. What the man has done, what Eric Holder has done, is he has enabled this president through his inaction and through providing legal opinions to the White House. He has enabled this president to continue violating the law. So rather than focus on the letter, why don't we focus on the things that Eric Holder has done in office that have led me to believe that he needs to resign, and for which I've called for repeatedly.
All right.
Maybe you'd like to join me.
15 seconds, sir.
Well, even though he had the extreme left ideology before you endorsed him, and now you want to do over. So, and you're right, we did leave the middle page out of the letter simply because of space, but if anybody's interested, there are copies of the letter at our table in the back, and we'll be glad to hand one out to you on the way out.
Mr. Barr.
Barry, you mentioned also, I think, transparency again this evening. And you also mentioned nonprofits. There is a nonprofit, or what appears to be a nonprofit, although I don't think you have the approval of the tax ID from the Internal Revenue Service, for a group called Firm Reliance. But it is a fact that you have filed, even though this nonprofit has been in existence since 2011, since 2011, you have failed to file the proper tax returns, as all of us here this evening have to do, and as other nonprofits have to do. It's called a 990, judging by your quizzical look. Why have you failed to abide by the law? Why have you failed to file the appropriate tax returns for this supposed nonprofit for the last 4 years, filing only one just this year?
All right, gentlemen, 15 seconds. Go ahead, sir. You're up. Yeah, you get a minute.
Bob, whoever's doing your research better do a little bit better job of it. We have filed all the 990s. They are online, and the accusations you're making that we have not filed for 501c3, we have. If you haven't been paying attention, there's been a little controversy with the IRS going after conservative organizations, and we've been a victim of that. However, as you should know as an attorney in the federal government, when you file, you're covered for 27 months from that filing. Or you actually have 27 months to file. It's indefinite from when you file. We have filed, we've been in contact with the Internal Revenue Service, who has told us they're preliminary. They have looked at it. We've been back and forth with the questions. We are just waiting for the final approval. We have done everything legal. We have filed the 990s. The 990s have been filed. But unfortunately, the out-of-control IRS is targeting organizations like mine, and I'm surprised that you have now attacked me on 2 instances tonight for teaching the Constitution to people, and that's what we do at Firm Reliance.
Mr. Barr, 15 seconds to rebut, sir.
Well, I'm surprised you raised the old victimhood defense like so many folks in Washington do it, and you're not even up there. The fact of the matter is that there is only one 990 that was filed, and that was filed this year. The others, you may have filed them, but they sure are not a matter of public record. Now, you may be a victim there also, Barry.
Mr. Loudermilk, your question for Mr. Barr.
Bob, you've been on both sides of several issues. You wrote the Patriot Act, now you're against it. You were against gay marriage by writing DOMA, now you're for it. You endorsed Eric Holder, now you're against him. You were against E-Verify, now you're for it. When you were in the Libertarian Party, you said you were for open borders, now you're for closed borders. You were a Republican, then in your own words, you were the standard bearer for the Libertarian Party, now you're a Republican again. Bob, will you please tell the voters, the 11th congressional district, how many do-overs do you actually need?
The only do-over is that they're going to re-elect me. They're going to elect me to serve them in the Congress of the United States beginning next January, Barry. And they're going to do that because they are not going to be pulled off track by these issues that you keep citing, some of which may have a kernel of truth in them, some of which, like this open borders nonsense and you and Eric Erickson's keep banning about, and has no earthly semblance to reality. Not one person in this room, including you or I, and I suspect Pete also, has ever been for open borders. I mean, that is absolute nonsense. What the voters care about, Barry, What the voters here and what the voters out there in the entire 11th District care about is somebody that they know who has been in the arena, who has fought these battles against government spending, who has in fact worked to and accomplished a balanced budget amendment, something that you can only talk about, who has actually voted for term limits, who has actually voted to cut taxes, not just talk about it as you do. So the difference, Barry, and the reason that I will be going to Congress in January 2015 and you will not, is because I have a track record up there
Time, sir.
in the Congress that these voters support.
15 seconds, sir.
Well, Bob didn't answer the question about mine on both sides of so many issues, and I think what the voters are looking for, Bob, is consistency. So when they send somebody to Washington, they know what they're going to stand for when they get there.
Gentlemen, you up for going for another round? Mr. Barr.
Well, let's talk about consistency, Barry. Will you tonight, you very proudly accepted the endorsement of one David Barton, who you described in a news release and a statement as the best, greatest constitutional historian in the country, and yet a man who has been roundly and uniformly criticized with facts for taking positions that are anti-Semitic, that are against women voting, and yet you continue to accept and extol, I suppose, this endorsement. Will you this evening, based on the record of this man, and we'll presume you didn't know anything about him when you accepted his endorsement, will you disavow David Barton and his view of history this evening?
I don't know where the information you get comes from. I've known David Barton for many years. He was in fact Glenn Beck's historian and constitutional representative or consultant when Glenn was on Fox News with his show. David's done a tremendous job of reintroducing Americans to the true heritage. You know, our endorsements are so long, we've had an open door policy on endorsements. I've recently gotten the endorsement of the majority leader and the new majority leader in the House, but I don't agree with everything that he stands, and he doesn't agree with everything that I stand for, but he does realize that I'm one who can come to Washington, work with others, and take care of the things and start fixing America. We are broken. And so, no, I'm not going to stand by here and dispel an endorsement of somebody that I believe has done a tremendous job in reintroducing Americans to their true heritage.
15 seconds, Mr. Barr, to rebut.
Well, there you go, embellishing again. The fact of the matter is that the majority leader has not endorsed you. The majority leader dropped by an event that you had up in Washington to try and help help remove some of the problem that you had by disavowing the Republican leadership and saying you'd vote against him.
Mr. Loudermilk, your question for Mr. Barr, sir.
We know there's not really anything you can say that would make me want to vote for him, so I'll just pass.
I think that gives you one more shot, Mr. Barr. He's passed.
Pardon?
He has passed on his question to you, sir. Do you have anything further? Another question for Mr. Loudermilk.
No, I think the voters understand there are differences between us by what they've seen.
Well,
and
then
heard.
let's make sure they do. You each have now 2 minutes to sum up your arguments. I appreciate you, and I'm sorry for my gaffes. And we'll begin with you, Mr. Loudermilk.
Thank you so much. And Bob, I thank you for your service in Congress. And Bob and I we've known each other for several years. We're both very passionate about what we believe. Yeah, I grew up not very far from here, and growing up here in Georgia, my parents instilled in me a certain set of values that we passed on to our children. Put God first in everything you do. Serve others before you serve yourself. And standing for what is right is not easy, but it is always right. And my dad was a World War II veteran and a very practical man, but gave me a lot of words of wisdom. One of the rules we had in the house is never complain. Do not complain. If there's something you don't like, you have two choices. You can do something to change the situation or accept it as inevitable, but complaining never accomplishes anything. In 2004, when I saw my state government going the wrong way, I took my father's advice, and I took my experience as a father, a husband, a veteran, a small business owner to the state capitol, where I served in both the state house and the state senate. There I became known as one of the foremost conservative leaders in this state. because of my consistent stance on those traditional American values that have made America strong of faith, family, and freedom. And it's because of that stance that I have been endorsed by almost every conservative organization in America. Family Research Council, Concerned Women of America, Freedom Works named me one of the top 5 candidates in the nation. Senate Conservatives Fund named me the #2 conservative candidate running for the House this year. Madison Project, Restore Our Republic, and even Club for Growth have stood up and endorsed our campaign. Why? Because of consistency. Because I have consistently stood for those values that are strong. I never look for self-promotion or to move myself into a direction or into a position that promotes myself, but standing firm for what is right. On July 22nd, you're going to have to make a choice. And that choice is, who do you trust will go and represent your values. We can take a major step forward on July 22nd to ensure our children have an America that is free, safe, and full of opportunity, because they deserve better than what we're passing on to them. I need your vote. I appreciate it. Go to standwithbarry.com, and God bless you, and God bless America.
Mr. Barr, 2 minutes, sir.
I've had the honor of placing my hand on the Holy Bible and taking an oath of office to serve these United States of America in 3 different capacities. The first was when I took an oath as an officer with the Central Intelligence Agency. The second was when I took an oath of office to serve in the House of Representatives of the United States of America in 1994 and 3 times thereafter, after being reelected. And before that, I had the honor of serving the greatest president of the 21st century and serving you as your United States Attorney and taking the oath of office for that job, for which I was proud to serve for nearly 4 years. In not one of those jobs did the person who was administering the oath or who was appointing me to that office say, "Bob, we want you to serve as an intelligence analyst and official," or "Bob, we want you to serve as a United States Attorney," or "Bob, we want you to serve as a congressman," because you'll just go up there, say the right thing, vote the right way, go along to get along, smile a lot. No. They looked me in the eye, President Reagan did, when he asked me to serve as his United States Attorney, and the voters of then 7th District, when they looked me in the eye, they said, "Bob, we want you to go to Washington because we know you are tough. We know you will not fold. We know you will go eye to eye, mano a mano, toe to toe against Bill Clinton and impeach the son of a gun," which is exactly what we did. They said, "Bob, we know that you will go to Washington and you will not only fight for and talk about a balanced budget, but you will accomplish it along with your team. You will go to Washington not only to talk about tax reform. Everybody's for tax reform. Everybody's against higher taxes. Everybody says they're going to vote for lower taxes. Fact of the matter is, there are 3 people up here on the stage, and there is only one that has been in the arena who has actually accomplished those things. I ask for your vote to do what you have seen me do in the past, to do again, and that is to send me to the Congress to represent you in the 11th District of Congress in January of 2015. Thank you all.
Thank you both.
Very great. Thank you.
You're candidates for Congress.
Thank you, Pete.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Loudermilk, thanks very much. Good to see you. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for coming tonight. The runoff election, as you've heard maybe more than once, is July 22nd.